My name is Liam, and I was always there for my brother David. He was once a brilliant chef, admired for his culinary prowess, but a series of personal disasters led him down a dark path. His son passed away from an illness, then his wife left him with half of everything. Losing his job was the final straw. He resorted to food for comfort and gained weight fast. Knowing that he was in a truly dark place, we rode the subway together almost every day, as I accompanied him to his therapist. The passengers always ridiculed him. He sat next to me, occupying more space than the narrow seat allowed, and people whispered and sneered. Some would laugh at his face, some would call him fat. Others simply wanted him to stand. The words cut deep than any knife. I tried to shield him from the worst of it, but the damage was done. Each day, I saw him retreat further into himself.
It's not fair, Liam. I used to be respected. Now I'm a joke.
I didn't know how to comfort him. You'll bounce back, Dave. You just need time. But time wasn't a friend to David. His mental health deteriorated fast. He started hearing loud. He'd sometimes suddenly flinch and start looking around in panic, convinced that someone called him fat. I noticed the changes, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands trembled, the distant look in his eyes. His obsession with society's cruelty grew, festering like a wound that wouldn't heal. He became convinced that everyone was in on it, that the world was conspiring to push him over the edge. One evening, David didn't come home. I found him the next morning, huddled in an alley, muttering to himself. His eyes were wild, haunted.
They're always there, Liam, mocking me, laughing at me.
I scheduled an appointment with my therapist immediately. David walked back to his apartment to change. When he returned, his demeanor was somewhat different. He suddenly seemed calm, too calm. There was a chilling coldness in his eyes. He carried a large bag, which he clutched tightly. What's in the bag, Dave?
All the answers.
I didn't press further, a decision I would regret for the rest of my life. We boarded the subway during the rush hour, the car packed with people. David stood in the center, and I took a seat nearby since he wasn't able to squeeze there. I distinctively remember the look David gave me when he laughed about it. I was a bit too tired, so I started listening to music. But suddenly, he pulled a butcher's knife from his bag, one of his prized tools as a chef. The crowd recoiled in shock. People grew uneasy. David's face twisted into a mask of rage and pain.
I've had enough of you people making me small. I am worth something, not a doormat people can kick on.
The first swing was at the man who had sneered at David earlier. Blood sprayed across the subway walls. Panic erupted. People pushed and shoved, trying to escape the confined space. I lunged towards David, but he was in a frenzy, years of pent-up rage fueling his attacks. I felt a searing pain as the knife slashed across my arm, blood soaking my sleeve. I collapsed against a seat, clutching my wound, helpless to stop the carnage. David couldn't see or hear me. He was consumed with rage. He moved through the car and carried on the carnage ahead. The smell of blood and fear was overwhelming.
This is what you wanted, isn't it? To break me? Congratulations, society. You won.
He took to a woman crouching close to him and struck her in the face multiple times. Two men jumped in to restrict him, but his big body fought through them easily, and then attacking them with the knife as well before moving to the next car. The authorities arrived at the next stop. They stormed the subway car, guns drawn. David didn't stop until they tackled him to the ground, subduing him with brutal efficiency. By then, the car was a scene from a nightmare. Bodies sprawled, blood pooling on the floor, and screams lingering in the air. David's eyes met mine as they dragged him away. For a moment, the madness cleared, and I saw my brother, the brilliant chef who had been consumed by his demons. He looked at me, tears mingling with the blood on his face. In the aftermath, 7 people were killed in the attack and several injured. The news labeled David a monster, but I knew the truth. He was a man broken by the cruelty of others. driven to madness by the relentless torment of society. I never thought I'd find myself recounting these events, but it's the only way I can make sense of what happened. My name is Cindy, and I was Angela's live-in partner. She was a well-known fashion critic, infamous for her scathing reviews and merciless fat-shaming. Her notoriety skyrocketed after a young actress, whom she had publicly humiliated, committed suicide. Angela seemed unbothered by the fallout, relishing in the attention it brought her. But then, one morning, an antique mirror arrived at our doorstep, and it changed everything. The mirror was beautiful, with intricate carvings along its gilded frame. Angela loved it immediately and decided to place it in our bedroom. To be honest, it wasn't up to my taste, but who was I to tell Angela? Strange things began happening almost immediately. At first, it was subtle. Angela would stare into the mirror for hours, transfixed as if in a trance. I caught her whispering to it once, but when I asked, she snapped at me to mind my own business. Her temper grew worse, and she started fighting me over random things. One night, I woke to Angela screaming. She said that she saw a shadowy figure in the mirror standing behind her. I turned on the light and checked, but there was nothing there. She was shaking, genuinely terrified, and I held her until she fell asleep again. And then I remember this day when she told me that while she was getting dressed, her reflection smiled back at her when she wasn't smiling. I can still recall her screams from that day. I saw nothing unusual, but Angela insisted. When I told her that we should be throwing it away, something happened to her, like she snapped and refused. But then strangely, she started avoiding it, covering it with a cloth. Within a week, she was hearing whispers calling her name. Our relationship also strained under the pressure. I tried to suggest that we at least move it, but she refused. Her mental state deteriorated rapidly. She stopped eating, barely slept, and when she did, her dreams were plagued by horrific visions where she saw the actress who had killed herself. Then, one day, I came back from work to find her huddled in a corner, sobbing uncontrollably. She claimed the mirror showed her reflection mutilated and bloody, with deep gashes running down her face and body. I tried to comfort her, but she was inconsolable, convinced that the mirror was showing her future.
All the places it showed mutilated in my body are the parts where I have had procedures done.
With that, I saw that her eyes had suddenly become red. She felt something and just ran for the bathroom. She picked up her scrubber and started frantically scrubbing her skin raw.
I can feel her. I can feel her touch, her cold, clammy hands all over my body. It's all in your head, Angie. I'm here for you.
As she cried her heart out, I felt utterly helpless. I calmed her down eventually and brought her to bed, but sometime around 3 in the night, I found Angela standing in front of the mirror, transfixed again. I heard her whispering,
I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
over and over.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Angela, who are you talking to?
Suddenly, she screamed, picked up a heavy candlestick, and shattered the mirror with some heavy blows. Shards flew everywhere. As I got up to run to her, a piece lodged under my foot. Blood was pooling on the floor as both of us were struck by glass. Angela just stood there, staring at the broken pieces, as if she could see something in them. And that is when our room started shaking. All the furniture, the frames, even our bed. I didn't think twice. I grabbed her and ran out of our house. We stayed at a friend's place for the time. None of us could understand what was going on. But on the second day, I got a panicked call from my friend, saying that she had run away. When we reached our house, Angela had locked herself in the bedroom, refusing to come out. We could hear her talking, pleading with someone. We were unable to break the door down, so we called 911. When the authorities broke the door, we found her lying on the floor, the shards of the broken mirror surrounding her in a circle. Her guts were slashed, and her lifeless eyes stared at me. I swear I heard a faint whisper of laughter as the grief overcame me. Angela's death was ruled a suicide, but I know the truth. That mirror was no ordinary antique. It was a conduit for something evil that fed on Angela. That fed on Angela. I always thought Allie was just a bit weird, like everyone else in our grad program did. He had those odd tricks. He'd tilt his head and smile for no reason, his eyes darting around as if he saw something we couldn't. But no one ever guessed that beneath his pudgy exterior lay a monster waiting to be unleashed. It was a Friday night at Jenna's house. Her parents were out of town, so she threw one of her infamous parties. A bunch of us, mostly friends from the program, gathered in her spacious living room. The atmosphere buzzed with the usual college party energy, a soundtrack of laughter and bad pop music blaring from the speakers. We were halfway through a round of King's Cup when the teasing started. It began innocently enough, with Rob making a joke about Allie's choice of seat, the only one that didn't creak under his weight.
Hey, Allie, at least the floor's got your back, right?
The room erupted in laughter. I chuckled along, feeling a bit guilty, but not enough to stop it. Allie's smile froze, and for a second his eyes went dark. I saw it, but I brushed it off as embarrassment. As the game continued, the jabs grew sharper. They picked on him, made fun of his eating habits, his size, the way he sweated when he laughed. Allie's face turned redder and redder, his fists clenching and unclenching. I should have said something, but I didn't. None of us did. It happened so fast I almost missed the start of it. Allie stood up suddenly, knocking over his drink. His head tilted in that peculiar way, and he smiled, a chilling, empty smile. You think it's funny? Making fun of me? There was an awkward silence. Then Jenna tried to laugh it off.
Hey, Allie, at least the floor's got your back, right?
He moved quickly, more quickly than I'd thought possible for someone his size. He grabbed a bottle from the table, smashing it against the edge, creating a jagged weapon. The first scream came from Becky when he slashed Rob across the face, blood spraying across the white carpet, and then chaos erupted. People scrambled to get away, but Allie blocked the door. His bulky frame couldn't be crossed. I saw my friend Greg try to tackle him, but Allie swung the bottle, cutting deep into Greg's arm. Greg fell back, clutching his bleeding limb. My heart pounded as I ducked behind the couch, trying to think. Allie's rampage continued, his heavy breathing mingling with the cries and screams of our friends. He grabbed a lamp, yanking its cord from the socket, and swung it like a club, knocking down anyone in his path. I peeked out and saw Jenna lying motionless, her head bleeding. Becky cowered in a corner, her face pale with terror. Suddenly, Allie went out of his way and approached her.
Allie, stop!
My voice cracked, but it was enough to make him pause. He turned to me, that eerie smile still in place. Why, Stuart, you want to turn? I grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy glass ashtray, and hurled it at him. It struck his shoulder, but nothing happened. Becky took the opportunity to dash past him, but Allie caught her by the hair, yanking her back with a scream. I ran towards him, my adrenaline-fueled bravery pushing me forward. I didn't have a plan, nor was I thinking it through. I tackled him right in his big paunch. He fell to the floor, but he was strong, stronger than I anticipated. We struggled, punching, slapping, kicking. Soon, his fingers clawed at my face. I felt a sharp pain as he raked his nails across my cheek. Through the haze of pain, I saw Greg sneaking up behind Allie with a chair. With a desperate shout, Mark brought it down on Allie's head. The chair splintered, and Allie went limp, his eyes rolling back. Mark and I stood there, panting, looking down at the unconscious monster. Blood oozed from the various wounds he'd inflicted on us and our friends. The room was a war zone, the aftermath of Allie's psychotic break evident in the bloodstains and broken bodies. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called the police, my voice barely steady enough to explain what had happened. When they arrived, the scene was brutal. Rob huddled in a corner, covering up his cut-up face. Greg had a torn arm. Becky and I suffered minor injuries. But Jenna, whose head he had smacked with a lamp, had stopped breathing. She was declared dead when brought to the hospital. Allie was captured for good.